Let's see. Use power process.
Maybe like concatenate.
Semantics.
Great.
Excited that Anna was
Yeah.
there. And then we try them to students.
I think, hello everyone. Hello everyone in the online audience. My name is Timm Amstein. I think there's some buzz going around after lunch floor. So yeah, very welcome to my session that we are going to discuss today what a knowledge graph is not. And if you're wondering what and if you're wondering why that question is important, currently I am employed as a senior delivery architect within Capgemini, which is an IT consultancy. And I have, most of the time, I have this question that somebody comes to me, some client comes to me, some of my colleagues comes to me and says, okay, we face that problem, that specific problem, and we want to build a good solution for that. And of course, as a graph enthusiast, I am most of the time are really intrigued to say, okay, yeah, you can use a graph for that. It will be totally great. It will be amazing what you can do with graph. But sometimes, and it could be anything. There could be skeptics that come back and say, yeah, I'm not really convinced. There could be or it could just be that even if I'm saying that graph would be great, it's just not a good solution and so on. So really, it's important as a graph enthusiast to really know the border of what a graph should be used for, what a graph should not be used for. And I'm seeing really that question now in a really broad term of graph technology as a whole. So I will not keep it straight to semantics or keep it straight to just one graph database or so. So please take this as a broad spectrum, but I think you will, shortly you will notice what I mean, because I have brought a lot of examples with me, and please believe me, I didn't make up most of them. No, so everything came up as, yes, somehow graph is involved in this, and somebody came to me or I noticed and said, okay, yeah, that would be great. And but still, all of them are somehow edge cases or cases where somebody discussed with me that, yeah, graph wouldn't be a good idea. So I thought, yeah, we have an audience of graph experts. What would be better than just to ask them what their experience was? And maybe a quick show of hands. Did any one of you already had that problem that they were asked a question that, could you do this with graph? And you were unsure if that was really something, yeah, you should use graph for. Is that something you encountered?
Yes.
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 Great. Then we're exactly right here. What I was thinking about is basically we will do SWOT analysis. So really easy thing. We can say, okay, we have a different use case. We say, okay, that's a graph strength. The graph is at its core as the core of that use case. We could say, okay, graph is not the main contributor here, but it would be nice to have something here, but it's basically, yeah, we have to compensate for some weakness here and there. So then we would put it here in the complementary section. Then we would maybe see some opportunities where graph is not strong yet, or there are other solutions which are just bad, where we think, okay, there's some potential there. And then there will be that section of, yeah, it's just not a graph technology case. And really, what I was thinking about, and hopefully that will work out, because then we will have real fun in this session. So first, we want to discuss. We want to really say, so I'm not the one who tells you, okay, this is and this is not. But I also don't want to overdo it, because we have a big audience and say, okay, we have to get to some kind of conclusion. Therefore, democracy. We will have this whiteboard, and hopefully everybody of you will see this. If you go to AirMeet, you should see it in chat. I will post it again if it's not there yet. So you will have a visitor link, and you will have access to this whiteboard. And as I see, many of you are already joined. So we will have this board for the whole session. And you can also, if you want to include some cases that you have, you don't have to raise your hand and ask me if I add it. Then please just put it in the landing zone so we can discuss it at some point. I want to test this whole thing for the first use case that I brought with me, because it's also a funny one. When the data fabric. I think many of you, or in many cases, if you go through LinkedIn, the data fabric is a killer use case for knowledge graphs. It's really the thing that is always mentioned, or some kind of variation of this. Yeah, there are some skeptics out there with other technologies that do data fabrics not with graph, or that say, okay, having an ontology and having this whole data graph setup is not really important. But I think, since I think that the result of this will be quite straightforward, we will test this as this will be our first voting session, and we will just say data fabric, and any member can vote. And what you can select is just here in this voting section. You can just click on the thing that you think will be the one that you put this through. Yeah.
Before we start voting, could you maybe give, because not everybody might know or like what data fabric is, or what is meant by saying data fabric, so maybe elaborate on the use case?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I forgot that. That should be the technical, so you can vote in the meantime if you want. So the basic core idea of the data fabric, from my point of view, is really to have different data sources that are in different data silos, put together, stitched together in one. Yeah, let's say some call it the semantics layer, some call it fabric, some call it but we have some kind of layer which is stitching different sources together and giving us some kind of unified view where we can access the different sources and can combine the different elements and the different data together. So that's the basic idea of the fabric. So everybody who's developing fabrics and so on, please stop me if I forgot something or some of the most important stuff. So, and I think, from my point of view, this is a graph solution or something where graph is important. And I have no vote left, and 13 people are currently still voting. So hopefully, still voting. Vote left. So yeah, 12 people still have a vote left. So please, you are in the voting process. Please select your decision, and then we will see what democracy says, where we end up with the data fabric use case. And I think I will give it just one more minute, because I have a lot, and like I said, I already also encourage you to add to this. I really want to have this as a especially the first results of the first question will be, if we asked first time if this is something or not, will be probably interesting, and so maybe we see some discussion afterwards. So let's see. So I will end the voting session, and let's see where our vote has ended at nearly a tie. That's interesting. So really, that the graph solution at its core has won by one vote. That data fabric is really a case for graphs, and some of you see that really that graph is one part of this, but there really needs to be some complementary stuff because it's basically, it also has some weaknesses. And really that way we can put the data fabric here. Let's put it just in between here, because I think 10 to 9 is not let's say a convincing result for just one category. Maybe to just give you one example, because already somebody added the data mesh. Yeah, we will use the data mesh soon. Maybe just to give you one example of the other case, because I wanted to give you, let's say, the obvious one. Yeah, that worked quite well. I want to give you the other one. So, for example, everybody of you knows that Git and code versioning and so on is a graph. It's nodes, it's edges, it's somehow linked together. It's a graph structure. So the question would be, yeah, if somebody comes to you and says, okay, I want to do this with graph technology and I want to build a new solution, and I wouldn't consider basically Git as part of the graph solution family right now. One could be, but so one thing would be code versioning as a use case, and yeah, maybe I've influenced your vote a little bit with this introduction, but that would be really a question. The next question would be, how do you see code versioning? If I ask you. And then we have 30 people voting again. So please give your vote and let's see where we end up with this. Because to give you that spectrum of where we could end up. So 16 people still voting. So, yeah, as I said, not to influence you too much, but democracy is also a little bit of a influence game. So, of course, I don't see Git as a graph case. Because so if somebody comes to you and says, okay, I want to rebuild Git, probably think twice about this. As a solutions architect, that would be my opinion. Maybe as a developer, it would be great fun to rebuild this, but yeah, if you really want to earn money with it, probably use Git. So then I think, okay, that's interesting. Very divided. So
But are we here voting for its feasibility as a use case, or the fact that it is a use case? Because I was thinking that, yes, it has a graph structure, but then it's like we're putting our, like, I guess, product owner hats on and be like, is there money in it, or is there a market for it? That's what we're also evaluating here, not just the graphiness of it.
yeah, it's and that's really why I want the audience to vote, because that's really the core essence of this. My viewpoint on this is, if you want to build a new solution and somebody comes with that use case of I want to version my code and I want to build something, is it a wise decision to go with graph technology or with knowledge graph in itself? So with this concept. And really, that is, I want to build something, and what's the right way to go? That was my interpretation of that. But as we can see, really, the Git, it could be potential for the future. So you would see my mouse here. So it could be something that we could tackle in the future. And I also see that maybe some meta information to commits, which would be more elaborate than the things that are currently there, make sense. Graph could be a complementary solution, yes. And yeah, it could be also just seen as a core functionality. Yeah, so Git is not the example, or is ending up at a place where I didn't think it would end up. But democracy is great. So yeah, I think since it just came up, we have the data mesh. The data mesh, the core principle of the data mesh is really that it's basically a company concept to build products as really the core feature of doing data integration in our company. So really having a product team which is built, which has own responsibility, own organization a little bit, and own core functionalities within their product in their realm, and taking input from other sources and providing some kind of product for the outside world, which others can subscribe to, which others can use. And most of the time, it's stitched together. Different products are stitched together in some kind of mesh, which concludes the idea of what the data mesh it will build in the end. I think there was 2 years ago, there was a talk also from Zhamak Degani. She's basically the founder of the whole data mesh idea, also within KGC. But yeah, I would be interested really what the public thinks, what data mesh is. But yes, first. Yes, so the general differentiation between data mesh and data fabric is that data fabric is really about connecting sources on a technological level. So it's really a layer of a technological layer of how to handle data. The data mesh in itself is more of a organizational shift to some group of people is responsible for a product. They are having their own responsibilities. They having their own little realm where they have to work on and build a good quality product, which is not the data fabric in itself that can be centralized. There can be one IT team which is handling this. Okay, I want to build a layer for everybody to access this and really work with it. The core of the data mesh is really you have a product team, you have a product owner, you have somebody. They have to provide all the information for customers that really subscribe to their product. That's really a little bit of a different mindset. Yes, of course, they are a little bit connected, and you could have a data mesh concept and a data fabric, which is basically connecting everything together. But that's really, at some point, it's also getting philosophical, because that gets hopefully separated enough. But yeah, I will give you the vote. Power to the people. Data mesh. Let's see where we end up. Yeah. So then I will mark in my little sheet that I already did the data mesh.
Is the voting open?
No.
Yeah.
Ha! I have to click start. Yeah. So I think for the data mesh, it's really an interesting question where you see the boundary of the technology. Because, of course, you can see a mesh and an organization and a product really, or different products connected together as a graph. But is that really graph technology, or is it just an organization? Maybe, maybe not. But really, the graph technology is somehow a part of this whole thing, I think, and was also to give you just the short sense of what was the result of 2 years ago when Jamak was talking about this. That I think the result was peanut butter jelly. So it goes well. Data mesh goes very well with knowledge graphs, but these are two different concepts that are, when stitched together and working together, can have great results, because you have a product which is, so it's totally feasible to build a data mesh, a fully functioning data mesh without a knowledge graph. Maybe that's also a good explanation of what I see, how I see this bracket basically. Would there be a fully functional solution that could be useful and would be a great solution without adding a graph? But there's a different, it's difficult sometimes to, but I see that they are really going really well together, and data mesh could complement some things that knowledge graph is bad, and I see this. I see it like this. But yeah, yeah, I think but that shows this position, I think, quite well. So some of you have said, okay, it's really a core feature, and graph should be the core of this whole thing. I see there's potential where we could potentially move more into with graph technology, and also see that the data mesh should be some standalone thing, and there could be some complement. So yeah, that's a great result. Yeah, we have. Sorry to not to demote this. We have one vote for it's just not a graph case. So we finally found one thing that is not a graph, yeah. At least for one person.
Data mesh is about product. It's not about implementation technology.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I can totally relate to that argument as well. So I have many colleagues that exactly see it like this: that data mesh is not a technological thing, or it's that really the most important thing here is the products and so on. So absolutely fine, but yeah, let's get on.
I love what you're doing here. I think there's two questions that you're actually asking into one, and maybe in the future that would be something. There's one is like, is it a future thing or is it current? And another is it a core solution? Because I could see something like here, I was thinking in the future it could be a core solution. So maybe there's like two different for the future. I'm not trying to.
Yeah. So, but yeah, let's adjust the question a little bit, because yeah, that's also if I'm asking the wrong question, I should notice. Yeah, if we ask the question a little bit fuzzy 20 minutes into the game, we can change that. So my thought process in this whole thing was, where are we right now? Because that's also why I have the potential future bracket, because okay, we have an opportunity for the future. If I say, okay, we will do the same session in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years, where are we then? Could be that this whole thing shifted, and somebody built Git from the ground up with semantic technologies, and everything will be different. So what I would see right now would be a snapshot of where are we, and what do you see? How do you see this? And really, yeah, maybe let's just go here. Supply chain. Also have the supply chain management. So everybody of you knows that supply chain obviously is also a graph. It seems that everything is a graph, and I think I have heard that sentence a lot in this conference for over the last year, and it seems somehow to be true, at least from what I'm hearing. But yeah, the question is really for the supply chain management. It's a problem that has been there for ages. And it's a problem that I think is not really solved still, even if it is for ages. But yeah, we have analysis problems, we have simulation problems, and so on inside a supply chain. But obviously, we have some kind of vendors and producers and so on that provide different products within a yeah, in a graph to some sort of customer. So and we have the yeah, established supply chain management tools. That means if you would build a solution, would you still say, okay, is building a supply chain with graph technology with right now something you would recommend people to do? There. Start. And I think so for the change, also adjusting a little bit. Are there any opinions here in the, so because during the voting, I'm now tend to use to talk about this stuff. Are there any opinions here from us?
So I work at a supply chain risk analytics company.
Yeah.
I took out the graph database.
Okay.
I might be changing my vote. So I think it comes down to the questions you're asking. And our first initial MVP questions were not very graphy. But then we got into the question area of, okay, how am I connected to this supplier? Or what's my shortest path? Or what are alternative suppliers for that? So that first one, how am I connected to such and such other company, is a shortest path question, which leverages the relationship. That's a very graphy question. The second one, what are my alternative suppliers, is a recommendation engine question, which is also naturally a graphy type of question. And so I think it's a graph use case if you're asking the right kind of questions of it.
Okay. So it really, for you, it really depends on. So I don't know if the chat really heard what you said. So just it really depends on the question and the utilization of what you want to ask in the whole supply chain game. And but I heard you correctly that first time you tackled the question, basically you took out the graph database as too complicated.
It wasn't doing anything for us. It was just costing us and making the data problem harder, because we had our traditional database and a graph database. So we had two problems to deal with, right?
Okay.
But we didn't have any graphy questions.
This question, I have zero experience with supply chain stuff. So then, what are the questions that you were trying to solve that you realized were not graphy questions?
The question, so the initial set of questions were, given this supplier, what's their risk profile? Which was just a series of, it was a matrix of numbers. So, and they were just properties on the suppliers, right? So I'm looking up Acme Corporation, tell me what their financial risk profile is. And it gives you a number and maybe a little bit of descriptive information or background on that. That's not a graphy question. That you can get that from any other database just as easily. It doesn't require a relationship.
I see. So you didn't really care about what is this company in relation to another, or in relation to some other?
The first set of questions, no, we didn't. But then later, as we expanded the feature set, then we started getting into those questions.
Yeah, no, basically what he's saying. I think, the graph solution allows you to, model contagion risk. It's one thing to just have a score based on a company's financial data. But that itself is contingent, as you pointed out, on, who they're related to. So, counterparty risk, counterparties of the counterparty risk, all that to me lends itself to graph analysis and downstream effects of, one supplier getting cut off, things like that.
Thank you. So, yeah, what I think now, putting my vote, is really, I see it as a potential. Because really, what I'm seeing right now, also especially in Europe, the idea of data spaces and collaboration between companies and really sharing data on a level of, okay, we have this, we have that, we want to have a chain of supply, or so really connected together, having this full visibility from end to end is getting more and more and more important, also from a regulation perspective and so on. And really, it doesn't seem to be solved, but there seems to be some kind of consensus that graph is not the worst thing to tackle this, especially with all the linked data concepts out there. So even sharing data between each other. So it's just doesn't necessarily have to be a database problem where you just do your supply chain management inside your company, but it can be the full supply chain of the. So I see great potential there, and let's see what the public says. We have graph solution at its core, potentials and complement. So I think we are really at something where supply chain management seems to belong in the graph portfolio at some point in time. And we will put it there. So I will just here. So as you can see in the you can also, we can jump back and so on. I will also try to, with all the results and all the things that we did here, that I collect everything together after this session also and give some kind of make things public so you can reference to what we are doing here right now. So that here. So I think the IoT streams have been there first. So I think this will also be an interesting question. IoT. I'm happy that since most of the stuff I already have on my sheet. So yeah, for the IoT, it's really having edge cases that could be, and there I would say, is IoT streams coming from the audience here or from the chat or? Don't know. Yeah. But then maybe I will just interpret what I think that could mean, because yeah, especially for the cloud vendors right now, IoT streams and IoT is really much connected most of the time to some digital twin concepts. And on the edge, the data that is modeled on the edge is most of the time really modeled in a linked data concept that you have some kind of entities that you can now afterwards, when you put it in your big database, you can somehow relate to what entity is meant by that stream that you put out there, because otherwise you could just not use it as good as possible if any little sensor and every little gadget that you have out there is just not talking the language that you wanted to talk. And therefore, the IoT streams are somehow as a graph problem related gadgets that are connected together to some kind of IoT hub or some kind of endpoint where you send it to. So you have a connected interface of different gadgets out there. Or you could also see this as with an IoT problem that you would have the graph directly on the edge device and do something on the edge device. But I think for the IoT streams, I would say it's more of the connection and the interrelation with an endpoint or a source. And we will put the IoT streams to vote, because that is probably interesting, because the IoTs don't know if we, as an audience, are really IoT driven, or if that's really a strong point of our conference right now. Viewpoint on IoT. I don't know. Are there any opinions in the audience on IoT?
I have an opinion on all of this.
Great.
I think most of the initial IoT streaming use cases are time series data.
Yep.
So it's metrics on time series, brilliant for ML that work. They love that, just eat it for lunch. Where they get really interesting is when you go past that and you're now like, okay, I have these devices and I want to know how they're interconnected. And so I think there's a future case for them in where you're dealing and you're now trying to coordinate things that are happening with some devices to other devices that aren't directly connected, but they are kind of loosely coupled in some way that may not be obvious. And I think there's kind of a graph hidden behind that when you're like, okay, I'm getting signals in different ways and there seems to be causality in that. And I don't know how these things are connected. So I think there's like a future use case for some of that sophisticated analysis, but the initial stuff is all just time series analysis.
Like reasoning on the consequences.
Right.
From one sensor to another.
Yes.
Along the way.
Yeah.
Of the network.
Yeah, I think there's like kind of an implied network in there. It's not always explicit. In the IoT cases I've seen, it's not always explicit that they're connected. And you're trying to figure out, are they?
Yeah.
I like that.
Essentially the digital twin concept that's
Well, so I think digital twin's separate.
I think since the digital twin is also already in the landing zone, I think we will take the digital twin afterwards because it's tightly connected. I also see it tightly connected, but really,
My client is
It's
having me work with IoT streaming and digital twins.
Yeah.
So that's why I consider them separate, because they're, in my client's mind, they're two different things.
Depends on the definition, and the definition differ from the you're speaking.
In my mind, it's one invoice. So I guess there is a graph there. It's me connected to these two things and the invoice I send to my client.
This reminds me of like, you don't want to participate because I don't know so much about it, but I once had a conversation with an IoT data manager for ships. So the maritime industry, cargo ships that have certain weather devices or like wave and like how to, for fuel consumption and to gather information. And I was discussing if there's like telling them about noise graphs and then discussing whether there could be something. And for analyzing the data, that there isn't really a case. I didn't see the case for the analyzing. Like, I think that is really where machine learning can, or like, it's just more like a big data flow analyzing thing that's, they just need to know the metric and how it goes. Not really a knowledge graph case in there. But then they were talking about this need to maintain the devices and to understand what kind of skills need to be on the boat or in the docks to maintain them or have them or check up and that orchestration or that coordination of this work, like a secondary work around IoT devices, at least for the maritime industry, might have a knowledge graph case to find or discover or to coordinate it correctly.
to put it all together, I actually think all of the cases are basically somehow knowledge graph, because the IoT device in itself has to be built on some kind of linked data concept, and somehow the data model should be clear and understandable what this thing is sending out. So we have linked data and data sharing, so interoperability with RDF and some other data. So we can send in JSON LD or something. We have the IoT concept connected to digital twins, which are where a lot of state management is involved. And so I really have to have some kind of, if it's a car or a ship or something, there can be cases where it's just operational of what's the state of my ship right now? Is it upright and is it swimming? Yeah, that could just be a sensor state of, yeah, I'm still here, I'm still swimming. There could be an analysis case that I want to have an event. Yeah, if I have, for example, with the car industry, if you are having a traffic jam or if there's an accident, then the car, if it slows down and so on, will recognize this and will send this information to the car supplier, and really that car supplier can then stream that data to some mapping provider, which is then sending this or distributing this to all of your devices in your car, which is pinging up, oh, there has been an accident there. So that is really an IoT case where this event that has some kind of semantic value of, okay, there has been an accident or there has been weather conditions and so on. Yesterday we saw crop fail with GIS data that something happens in some area where some sensors, probably all of that were sensors which detect smoke or something, which comes up and say, okay, we take this information as semantic value. Okay, there's smoke. There seems to be a fire somewhere, because the smoke is going. So I really see this as great potential in some cases, and I'm interested what you say. So yes, it seems to be a potential case with IoT. So 3 votes for not, 3 votes for complementary, and 2 for its core. But I think the main vote now is really for there's potential there. Great, then we will put this one as potential. And as I said, I will just really, I think you now know how it. Let's do the famous digital twin. I think there are a lot of implementations out there. There are a lot of definitions out there. A digital twin can be everything from a city or a planet or something to a one small sensor or one little thing. Maybe even the physicists are doing digital twins of atoms or even smaller. So there is a wide variety of this, and the use cases of digital twins are also very much diverse. The question is really, is digital twin necessarily connected to graph? Is that really something where, like I said, so is it something that could live very well without a graph, and the graph would make sense maybe to it, or is it something that should have a graph always in its core? Because I know many solutions, many vendors that started with digital twins or marketing digital twins and so on, and have not used a graph technology at all. Maybe you could say that some things are linked, but it's not natural graph technology and so on. And so that would be the question. And let's put digital twin on the board. Start. And maybe, yeah, for the audience, what do you think? Digital twins. I think that is one buzzword you've heard so many times probably somewhere. How do you see this? Is this something that always pops up and where you think, oh, graph, great, next graph case? Or is that something where you are interested because it's basically 3D animation of some kind of physical object, and you say, okay, that's a digital twin. You can move around in AR or VR and just try to fiddle around with that digital twin?
As we said, I think it depends on the definition of a digital twin, because that differs a lot depending who you talk to. Like I was part of a project building digital twins for the oil and gas sector in Norway, and they modeled everything in a graph, from the type of electricity going through the different kinds of cables to the sockets on the wall of the toilets and platforms to the whole platform itself. Like they had a concept for everything because they needed detailed descriptions on what happens if this power cable is cut off, right? What does that affect in the whole platform? So that's like a reality plus reflection, which is their digital twin. But if you ask somebody else, they might have a different opinion of digital twin. And I think that not all definitions of a digital twin is applicable to knowledge graphs, perhaps, especially if you're thinking about real-time data. Might be hard. Then again, IoT streams.
Yeah, then we are with IoT streams again. Yeah, which is most of the time really going into some kind of digital twin application. Yeah.
Without semantic, isn't the digital twin so really not having semantics on what they're looking at?
Could be a view. So I don't say it's wrong if you feel like that, but yeah, I think that if you are looking at the engineer perspective, so how engineering worked for the last few years, and with computer-aided design and doing simulations and finite element analysis and so on different objects that were in digital space. They were just using a mesh and then applying some force to it and so on, and they would still call it a digital twin because they say, okay, yeah, I have a digital object that I can manipulate in digital space, and I can see what happens if that thing spends 200 hours with that applied force, or if there I have some oscillation on that specific part, and what happens? Does it break? Does it not break? I think from a human perspective, of course, there are semantics involved. Of course, they will do something, but is it really something that they implemented in their technology? No, it's just that the technology they use is just a tool of, okay, I need this to be done, and I need this simulation to be running for hours and giving me some examples, which I, as a human, will somehow semantically interpret what this means. So I don't see this, it's not wrong. So, but the question is for us as a graph community, is this something we see and say, yeah, there's some value in this, so put a graph on that. Yeah, if you use this for years now without semantics, great for you, but I could enhance your could enhance your case even more if I give you the possibility to connect this with, okay, what are the consequences? What are the events? Maybe I connect this with real-time events that are happening outside the world, where I say, okay, yeah, exactly this simulation I have been running in the lab, where I know this will happen, this will be critical. I know this is currently happening in the world, maybe some temperature fall or some rising temperatures I know that my product will fail. So I have this semantics and I can link this to, maybe it's a potential, maybe it's something that is already reality and we have already embraced it, or it's something where, yeah, we say, there's nothing to do with graph. It's just simulations of some voxels.
I think it depends on what conference you're at. So if we're at the mechanical and
Yeah,
electrical engineering conference, they'll be like, semantic what? If we're at the data day conference, they'll be like, oh, the semantic track is later. And if you're at the knowledge graph conference, they're like, well, of course it is.
Yeah. I think we have the tendency of seeing graphs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's exactly why I'm doing this
Right.
talk here.
and we have a hard time of because I think we could put a bar graph everywhere.
Yeah. But you get a bunch of like mechanical engineers in a room and they'll be like, well, it either works or it's broken, right? They're looking at the problem completely differently.
That's what I wanted to highlight with this, with this maritime example, is that for them, the hardest thing currently that they are trying to, where the technology is still catching up, is just managing all the time series data. Mm-hmm. That is their biggest problem, that it's like really low on the priority list to get this like additional information of these devices kind of work in the same way, or there's this like further information about this device, which is kind of like the same, or connecting to that other one, that is completely secondary to their needs currently.
And I can add to this whole, we are now thinking of this in a very open way. So, or let's say we are open to using graph on this. You don't have the adversity of people that are using their tool for 10 years, 20 years. The adversity of people that are saying, okay, this would be a bad idea, I have a better solution within some other technology, so on. So what I want to highlight here, and that's exactly the reason why I want to have this conversation, is that we are enthusiasts and we are running to, okay, graph will save the world. But there are people out there like us, and they are very much happy with the work we do, but they would say for this problem, graph is crap, or we don't care about graph for this thing. It could be done much better than that with that kind of technology. And really, we should be aware that there are people out there that don't see it in the way that we are, and maybe find some arguments and here where we say, okay, this is really the killer case that we have, and this is really the reason why should use, because that's always why what it comes to. It's really, why are you using this? And as you already mentioned, it's, yeah, we have some kind of case or some kind of problem we can only, or we can tackle best with knowledge graph. It doesn't have to be the whole solution. It doesn't have to be, but that capability makes sense in some kind of way. And that's also why, I see this as potential, and I want to.
If I might add, Tim.
Yeah,
I hadn't heard
of
this
course.
term of art before, but when I first heard it, maybe some other people thought of this too. I thought of like a digital twin for myself. And I guess I would think like, what would I need to identify with a digital twin? And that didn't come off as a graph problem to me. That came off more like an artistic, aesthetic judgment I'd make about, you know, what is like the unit, whatever, what is like the space in which this is operating. But I think after everyone kind of gave the actual definition of it, I moved more to the left on this.
Yeah, and I want to really highlight digital twin. There are so many definitions out there. You could see as most of the time humans and so on are in the enterprise are more seen as there are called customer 360 cases or customer digital twins or something, which are more because sometimes you have the tendency, if you think about digital twins, think about more machinery and physical things as, okay, I've built something, I have a product, I have a digital twin, but you can see this as, and I think from time perspective, smart factories. So you have the digital twin of the full factories. You have smart cities and so on. That all somehow relate to that concept digital twin on a different scale. But all of them in the background, if you think about the data that they have included there, is somehow connected. It's somehow has to be defined, semantically defined, what is meant there. So I see with personal digital twin, and I don't know if the personal knowledge graph and so on, probably there will, inside the conference, there will be some people talking about personal knowledge.
There is a presentation on personal knowledge graphs on Thursday.
Then yeah, we will hear something about that. It's really, there's some kind of digital twin. And it's really, it doesn't have to be that I'm there in 3D model and I'm modeled like this and I can move myself around a little bit. But really, it's just descriptions of things I like, topics I like, and this could be called a digital twin if you want. Or if you not want, it could be your profile, it could be your something. But democracy says, it's complementary, so we could have a digital twin totally without graph, and would make some sense to put something 6 for core and 5 for potential. So the majority, even if it's just a small majority, puts it in that bracket here. Let's say here, a little bit. So. Yeah, now it's getting hard to discuss. Maybe because it will be probably a defining factor of the conference and discussions, and there, so you don't regret going to the parallel session of the panel about LLMs. Maybe we can shortly talk about this one. The large language models, the big hype, the discussions that are around there. If it's the next level of AI, the next level of knowledge inside a machine, and so on. The question would be, really, is that capability, that concept that we have here, which is most of the time really on a statistical level, is that something we would consider as graph technology? We would consider having a graph case there. I think there are some people here and also on the conference that probably see a great potential, or at least a complementary potential there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the talks coming up for all this stuff. But yeah, what are your opinions on the large language models? Open up the vote.
So yesterday I heard a new phrase, symbol rounding, mentioned by Orlasila. We were talking about all these approaches. I was also mentioning that with like, hey, with large language models, we can make your knowledge graph bigger. I'm like, I don't care about the knowledge graph being bigger. I want it to be curated, like looked at by humans, a human voice in all of this. And if it's like little semantics, will go a long way. And I find it much more interesting to do the opposite, which is, or do it in the other direction, which is have this like statistical model, put the tokens in according to the context into this order, and being like an eloquent language producer to give it some background information of facts. So give that little amount of structured knowledge that then holds the facts in a transparent and thus trustable manner, and plug it into there so it can, you know, even though it's putting those tokens next to it, it will know that some of those symbols actually need to be in place with each other, because that's what the little amount of facts told the machine, or this kind of that mathematical result of it, and so that we can have not something that is just eloquent, but eloquent with facts. And that's why I would vote for complementary solution, because I also have some use cases running currently, some research cases inside IKEA, where we want to explore if the large language model could be better, because it's not only spouting bullshit, but it's also actually saying real facts because of the knowledge graph. So it could enhance it. That's my vote.
I agree completely. I think initially when I, started playing around with them, I didn't view it so much as a graph problem, but now that I've been seeing these tools like, Microsoft open sources their semantic kernel. There's tools like LangChain, which allow you to give, memory, agency, and the ability to pick functions, the ability to plan and put that around a large language model, like especially like the planning function, right? Like mapping a decision tree to like, okay, like this is, you give it an open-ended objective, it creates like concrete steps as to how it's going to achieve that. And I think, modeling that as a graph is like is a perfect way to do it. And I'll shamelessly plug, I'm here with dgraph, and we have in our graph database, we have a way you can, very seamlessly, with the Lambda function and using the OpenAI API, generate embeddings from your categories. And if you say want to map certain parts of your database into like a set of categories or some, structured ontology or language, we generate embeddings for the things in your database, the categories you want to put them in, and we can, seamlessly like mutate the database and add attributes or add data to that database to do that. So if anyone wants to learn more, please stop by.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm not technical in this area at all, but just kind of learning about it and knowing more about it. I come from a compliance and regulatory perspective. I feel like, especially with Shackle, like I would want that to be in that package with the LLM. I feel like Graph does a really good job of delineating those things, and it would probably be, at least in my opinion, easier or more clear to be able to go in and look at something and determine whether it's compliant or if it's meeting a regulation with some sort of graph structure versus maybe another type of technology.
Do we feel like you start out with graphs, like these AIs in its infancy, let's say, and then over time the AI just gets better and then it no longer needs it anymore? The scaffolding camp.
No, I would say we have pillars upon which real AI sits on, and one of the pillars is the statistical thing. So that's like one pillar. The other one is robotics. We want them, like the AI, to actually like be more like us, like physically more like us. And then the third one will be the symbol grounding. So symbols and symbolic AI, where so I think it's just a pillar upon which we need to build AI upon. And it's also it's also like a way in which we humans can give our opinions or regulatory like consensus things in democracy, like you come to a consensus, say this is now the rule. It could be the other way around, and some people are doing it differently. The data could suggest something else, but we want it to be this. We want to build this reality as humans. So I think it should be there forever, that we can have this human voice in there. And it's like with my kid, like it's learning the little language model. It's learning quite a lot about the world, and by perception and analyzing the data, like the data of how the world is. But then sometimes I like, yes, but you hear in this context, you cannot talk about potty stuff. Like here you can talk about, even though your friends are doing it, but you can't. It's a regulation. We don't talk about it.
Once they become.
Just please, we had.
Oh, no, I was going to say, as machine learning and AI matures, I think one of the things that will become more relevant again is explainable AI. So like to the regulatory stuff, for example, if some AI makes a decision on whether or not you can get a loan, there are laws that say, you have to be able to explain that you're not discriminating against said person, and you can't just say, oh, the AI decided this. You have to be able to explain your reasoning, and to be able to audit that reasoning is, I think, one of the necessary things you'll need in order to productionize these kinds of systems.
So I totally agree. I think we should go back to the point where what was the intent or the thing that we are most highlighting with knowledge graph. The possibility to create something that the human can understand, where you can put human-like knowledge inside a machine-readable format. And that is really at the point where I think the LLM comes also from the other point of, okay, I'm a machine, and I have this statistical model that this human on the other side will not understand. So I'm thinking that, or let's say, this machine has to somehow be explainable. What does it do? Which facts and on what basis do I say the things I say? And the fact that we know something like facts, that there is some kind of semantically distinguishable thing as, okay, this is a fact that can be somehow validated against some kind of truth, is a thing which will stay. Even if that thing will get more elaborate and will be better at speaking all the languages and so on. All the languages have that thing of, okay, a human or some machine wants to express itself in a way that some others can understand. And this whole, I generate a language, or I generate language in a way that you understand it, it seems elaborate to you, is just one step from the machine to us as, okay, yeah, you didn't understand me in bits and bytes, so I will come to you and give it to you in the way you know best. But really that point of validation, and that's also how I will vote for this, is I also see it really as a complementary thing, that this point of validating what does this thing know and what is it based on. And this whole notion of, okay, we've learned everything from the internet, pulled it together, and then you get answers from the wisdom of the internet, is like the wisdom of the crowd thing, where, oh, the wisdom of the crowd thing is the best thing that you can get. Bullshit. But so yeah, I'm also seeing this curated question. Yeah, it will come, but it will be, the solution itself will probably stand alone without graph. And if we leave it alone, and that will be some kind of probably a solution, that if we leave it alone for the next 5 years and say we ignore it because we don't like it, could be a threat to semantics or something, then it will definitely take off as, okay, it's just unregulated, saying something and people are using it. And let's not go into all the other potential consequences that can have. Probably there are other sessions and other panels now for that kind of question. But yeah, I think the majority saw it like I did. So we will put the LLMs on the complementary section, and maybe. Let's look at the time. So it's 9 p.m. in the evening. That makes sense. Yeah, but 30 minutes. Maybe. Forecasting. Forecasting is something I can. Event calendar. Content strategy modeling. Let's take forecasting. Because recommendation systems and forecasting and prediction and so on is so many times referred to also as use cases where we will talk about, okay, we set something up and then now we can predict something and forecast something and so on. Really, that use case comes up a lot, but the question is also really, is that a graph thing? Is that really graph capability that brings us this forecasting? I would also throw in this a little bit with forecasting. I would throw in scenario analysis or what if analysis and so on. So it's really that simulation aspect of okay, I do forecasting and it could be that range of things, and it could be that's what could happen, that's what could happen, that's what could happen, and I predict that this, because this, I think with forecasting we are also one step ahead of, okay, if I have a forecast, I can, based on this forecast, I will have to do a decision. So I have to do an informed decision based on my data, which is the whole, I think, the holy grail of this whole data endeavor that we are on, that we are using this data to make informed decision for ourselves, for our company, for everybody. So that would be the standard we have to go to really support companies with our data, that we are somehow getting to that decision and action standpoint. What is your opinion on, and how do you stand to forecasting? Are there any opinions? Is that something that interested you, or should we just do a speed round and say, let's get it over with?
So I mean, I would view it as a graph, both from like a knowledge graph perspective and like a probabilistic graphical graph model perspective, so like both inductive and deductive reasoning you would use. I would look at the graph as like a really good way to model forecasting, like whether you're looking for particular instances or general principles. I think the graph works great.
Great. Any other opinions?
I'll see it as a complementary. Forecasting is done pretty well so far without the use of knowledge graphs in many cases. However, using knowledge graphs brings that extra context or extra relationships that you may not necessarily have looked at that scope without the knowledge graph, especially in cases with like personalization as well. That's a really good case of forecasting. Again, forecasting is a very broad concept that you put in there, right? So you can think of it in so many different areas. As well. In so many areas, it's already been done really well. It's being done really well without using it. But I think it could really complement it in so many cases to bring more personalizations and more relations and context into the forecasting area. And also explanations. That same thing with the whole AI stuff, because a lot of these forecasting can happen using machine learning stuff, which is one explanation. So it was
Yeah. So I also personally feel the same way, but I also see this as first, there has to be some kind of graph problem. So if we go think about supply chain management again, if I do my forecast on capacities of different vendors that could break at some point in time, or I have some really bottlenecks in my supply chain that will eventually break because I've ordered too much or I need too much of a certain kind of product in a certain region, then probably the graph will somehow help me to navigate that, illustrate that, make it explainable, and say, okay, that's why I need this. Yeah, in some cases, like you said, it's just mathematics. It has been done. I really like that, for example, capacity management and all the production cases, let's say production lines and so on, see what goes best on what machine and how to predict what will happen and so on. All of these on a mathematical level, they will most of the time use a directed graph and then do it as a matrix, a matrix compute process. So probably absolutely no graph technology from our perspective involved, as okay, you need a graph database and so on, but then you are back to that point of, you have a matrix with just input output and so on, and you have zeros and ones and just do your matrix computation. But on the back end, it's a graph again in thought process of what they will write down on paper when they model things like, okay, we have problems here. So I would see it as a complementary thing. And the question is, do you see it the same way? Seems like that. Also, to not put this as there's one vote for not. So it seems like the majority again. It seems like it's not ending up as clear as I thought it would be. So it's much more diverse. The question, maybe my categories weren't good enough. But yes, we see this. Maybe there is this one big thing that I see maybe a speed round of. Has somebody put recipes in the room here? Yeah. What do you mean with recipes?
Like food recipes.
Food recipes.
Cook. Yeah, like the ones that they are actually quite big content in SEO. To they tell you their life story first about their granny, and then you have the recipe and you have the ingredients. Some ingredients they don't have this, like you could swap, but they in their text, if you do read about the grandma, you can hear like how you could swap the apple with the pears, and you could still make the same food. You don't have apples today, but you have pears, so they're really good in the market. It's also like the combination of things, the preparation of things, and all of that material. I've always wondered, I think it would be a fantastic knowledge graph use case.
So you have the ingredients, you have as a graph, you have the workflow as a graph, you have the connections as a similarity, and basically things that are similar in some kind of sense.
Especially
as
the
ingredients as a graph.
especially for the use case of alternative ingredients in recipes. Maybe I should have mentioned that. Exactly. Or like any kind of sibling structure inside the ingredients. Like here you use apples, but actually like you can use any fruit of fruit here of this kind of that's not too soggy or too watery or something like that, like a firm fruit, and so on. So because there's also like all these applications of what do I have today? What can I cook with? That's a lot
That's
of
a big use case that
Yeah.
this would support, yeah.
yeah, like what can I have this, I have like, I feel like caramel, but I also have apples. I want it to be healthy. I have muesli. What can I do with it? Oh, I can make these like apple cookies with it. No eggs. I don't need eggs, right? Because I don't want to get to the store to get eggs or something. So
And also,
It's
if
quite a
you're
big
missing something, you
Yeah.
can reason similarities.
Yes.
Like, we have a colleague in Sweden that did that for the Swedish liquor monopoly thing. And he categorized wines in different kinds of tastes because that is universal somehow. So you could reason then similar wines that are not tasted yet in the collection for the wine monopoly of Sweden. And that you can do on the recipes as well. So if you miss a spice, what other spices are similar enough for this recipe?
Exactly. I don't have ginger now, but I don't have garlic, but I could replace it with ginger, maybe, because I sometimes
So
do.
we have intelligent recommendation systems.
Don't do that.
We have similarity. We have
And there's also like, I really enjoyed this recipe. What could be other similar recipes as well? Then you can do that too.
And then you tell the LLM to write the story about your grandmother.
Exactly.
yeah. Please give me an emotional story.
Emotional story of how
background, yeah.
I love this recipe.
Yeah, I think you can even abstract that question and really say, okay, it's some kind of bill of material. And so notice I'm coming from an industry background most of the time. So really, I think this recipe, or okay, I have my personal recipe, or what I have to do in there. The companies have to do their recipes to put their products together, and then yeah, it's all matches together. So seems like a pretty good graph case to me. So maybe it's wrong in this session because we wanted to find out what's not graph, and I think that bracket is a little bit small. Yeah, so I think yeah, it's complementary, core, potential. It seems at least there's a good graph case. And if it's just a minor thing for as an addition or a big potential for a graph can be evaluated by everybody, then we put the recipes in there. So let's see, we have 9 minutes left. Is there anything where you say, okay, that's one thing I want to discuss?
I posted mine. I really want an opinion.
What is your
Content analysis?
Content analysis? Content strategy modeling?
Content analysis, social, yeah, the one in the middle.
There,
Yeah.
That was too big.
A lot of yeah, sorry.
No.
Sorry.
No. Content analysis. So can you give us some content for that?
Yeah, so a lot of my colleagues at my agency, when they're analyzing documents, use content analysis methodology. So you're going through and basically trying to find themes and documents, but a little bit more manually. I mean, there are software programs like Invivo where you can go in and kind of create a coding book and whatnot. But I've always wondered if graph, an ontology or graph, like, could be used to help with that and make it a little bit more interesting or complex, or be richer in what it provides instead of just having like a static code book and just using that. So for anybody who's generally familiar with content analysis, I'm curious to hear what people's thoughts are.
I'm curious, what are your, so analysis is complete, what do you do with that? Like, what questions are you answering?
So depending on the objective, like, let's say they're going through survey results for people in a particular federal program, right? And they're finding out the experiences of that people in that particular program. So the objective might be what is known about experiences of individuals that participate in said federal program, right? So they might be looking at survey results, they might also be looking at literature, they might have done interviews with key stakeholders, groups to like gain information, right? But this is just like one set of evidence.
So that's it, kind of like to summarize things for stakeholders in that?
Or well, it's going into a report to publish to talk about the topic overall, but just to pick out themes of, okay, what are stakeholders saying about X issue that and then, kind of trying to percolate out from that.
Okay, so kind of for information dissemination use cases.
I mean,
That's fine, I'm just trying to understand.
yeah,
What, usually, we do work and then somebody consumes our work and they do other things as a result of it.
right.
Is
So,
the overall, like, generalized, like, definition of life. Right? So I'm just curious, kind of, like, what are the particulars on use case? Like, who are the users that, and what do you expect them to do with this additional information?
okay, so they are going through the documents that they're going through and coding them for particular themes or ideas that they see. They're then taking that information and incorporating it into the body of a report to publish.
Okay, and the published report
Is disseminated to the public. It's for Congress, but it's disseminated to the public.
Okay.
It's usually a summary of things, right? That these many were talking about these social aspects,
Right.
and the others were highlighting this, but
Yes.
this was a minor thing, and this was a bigger thing, and
Right.
so you can have the numbers on them. I actually did content analysis for my master thesis that I wrote in the classical music scene.
Oh, okay.
So because I have both like this master in engineering, but also classical music, and I interviewed 9 different professionals who are teaching theater, fine arts, and opera in the Fine Arts Academy in Finland. And what I did is every sentence that they said in the interview, I labeled with a theme. And then what I did is I did 2 layers on top to categorize the themes. So in a way, it was like a bit of a knowledge graph there.
Right.
So that I could move on these different levels. I could get more granular, or I could say, well, on this very granular level is just too many themes for me to do a summary. So all these these themes that I picked up on the granular level, I can summarize on the second level better. And then overall, I can structure my thesis based on the first level to like, these were the ones about education, and these were the ones about how the art in itself, the expression in itself or something. So
And that more of a taxonomy.
it is
tagging
the tagging taxonomy. It's just tagging things and having a taxonomy for it, which I think is,
So
but then, yeah.
the other place that I'm seeing this, again, coming from an academic background where I did qualitative work and used qualitative data analysis software, is this is now in the UX space. So, right, you do a whole bunch of like screen recordings of sessions of people using your product. You can now pretty accurately generate a transcript from that session. And then how do you automatically classify what people are talking about in that UX session? So there are places that's, again, outside of like qualitative data analysis where that stuff is happening. And right, it may be that you have a graph that are the features of your product or whatever. And now you can say, let me look at all of the interviews. I've done 100 interviews. Find me all the ones where people talk about that feature.
Right, because I think like there's sometimes where it's a very simple content analysis and it just needs a basic taxonomy. But there are times where there's a lot of content and I'm like, well, just using a basic taxonomy may not, from my perspective, may sell the work short. It might make sense to build something a little bit more complex and you could get more richness with the information that way.
So I see this really from coming from information extraction, knowledge-based population, because really that what you have is non-structured information, text, speech, something, which the people will go through and annotate, either by tagging and annotate the document or really annotate the sentence and so we are at entity recognition, entity linking, slot filling for some events, we are at maybe also event detection and so on when something happens. So it's all, from my perspective, knowledge-based intelligent knowledge-based population, which is really I think one central graph case where this NLP world and the ML AI world comes together with the knowledge graph world, in the sense of, okay, I have to train, if I want to help your your colleagues doing things. What their most tedious thing is to go through that text and find all this stuff. So what I would help you with would be finding these concepts, trying to highlight these concepts and trying to link them together and help them find this thing that they need to address and the things that they want to find. I see this as mapping this, for example, to the biomedical industry and so on. They have loads and loads and loads of papers, and they want to see what one pharmaceutical or one drug can do, for what effect has one drug on the body and so on. So, but that information is collected through hundreds of papers because everybody is doing stuff on different levels. So. Really, the problem for me is knowledge-based population, because you will have some kind of model, some kind of end result you want to have. And then you really have that problem of, okay, I need this document, which is unstructured. I need all of this information pulled up, somehow pulled out of that document and somehow be analyzable in my database to really do a quantitative analysis and quantitative statement on that. So for me, on that level, that is a graph. It could be that it ends up in a relational database or some other database that doesn't really, I would recommend putting it in a graph, but that doesn't really necessarily have to, or it doesn't have to be a database at all. Like you said, it could be just the information for the people that are writing another transcript or another report in a non-structured way to put it. Would be great to have the, maybe not from a regulatory perspective, but really have this information pulled out and then generated in a sense of by some of the possibilities AI has to generate a big text with facts. But then we are really at the point where we have to talk about really how to model the fact that way, that everything is still explainable, even if so much AI would be involved to extract and do things and then put things anywhere too. But I think, yeah, from my perspective, that's a graph case, because I have not seen anything that works for if you want to visualize the content of one document in a way that, or in some other way than graphed it. So if you have a graph on a document which is showing what's in there, that's the only way where I say, okay, this is comprehensible. There, I can reason on that. I can say, okay, this is correct or it's not correct. It's the only, even the document itself, the text itself is so ambiguous that anybody could interpret it, that the graph in itself that you would put out of the document is the only thing where you could really say, okay, this is right or this is wrong, or somehow connected together to make something. I don't know. So, but that's why I would see this as actually as core.
Tim, maybe I'm underselling graph, my understanding, but I like to think of, if I can decompose something without losing some emergent meaning, then I think graph works great. The problem occurs, so I take the example of, like, I'm trying to analyze a story, right? If you have, like, the first 90% of the story is someone going through hardships, right? And then the end of the story is, oh, but they overcame it. You completely reinterpret that, or you reinterpret the first 90% in a very different way than if they failed at the end, right? So there's some, like, emergent thing that you can't just decompose the story into, like, oh, this was bad. No, like, this all becomes good when the person overcomes it, and then they reinterpret all that hardship as, oh, that made me who I am, versus, oh, that person fails. They interpret that as, oh, that's why I failed. I think if you can decompose it without losing that emergent meaning, yeah, but if you're in that type of case where that you need to have that kind of holistic perspective, maybe I'm underselling what a graph, the potential of graph, but
it's totally fine. Everybody can, or there are so many things we can do. Yeah, the potential is there, and we have to somehow formulate that potential into some solution. So I want to This says I am over time. That is probably correct. So, as you can see, we have had great conversations. Thank you for joining. As I said, I will try to put all of that in some written form so you can relate to that, and you can use all that information that we've been putting out here. Yes, thank you very much. We've not found too much stuff that is not knowledge graph, yeah, but we the goal of this was to find edge cases. So I think having a lot of stuff that goes here is probably the sweet spot we wanted to achieve. So thank you very much, and
Great job. That was awesome.
And you wonder what the Vivo and those other software products are doing.
Yeah,
There's some good questions.
that's my like challenge, because like sometimes people do it very like basic, right? Just go to Excel and do their thing. And then some people are like, okay, I will go through in Vivo, but they still see in Vivo as this like effort and this like, cause I mean, there is a little bit of a learning curve, right? But like I see like sometimes when it's like really huge engagement and there's a lot of analysis going on, I'm like, well, like I always want to be like, okay, is there a way to like make this more efficient or standardize a little bit? Because we like to see like engagements as, oh, this engagement is this way and this engagement is that way, and every use case is separate and different. But I feel like there should be at least some room for me to like find a way to like make it easier a little bit for people.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, so part of the reason I'm engaging with this is like, when I first started learning qualitative data analysis and learning about like how you build a code book, I'm like, oh, this is like building a taxonomy kind of.
Yeah.
And so I actually did a poster about like, how would I take a coding taxonomy, like a code list, and start modeling it in microvision. So, well, it was only a poster, it's not very interesting, it was just the idea.
Is it summary like abstract?
Yeah. But in this conversation, then it's getting to that point of part of qualitative data analysis is the which is evolving as you build the things that you detect. So how would you model the theory building part of that as a graph? Probably may depend on which part of QDA or qualitative methodology you fall in. But that may be the thing that we're missing, is the, like, you can extract certain kinds of semantics out of the individual statements in an interview or something like that, but then that arc of the story is something that's outside of it, that's is modeling. Exactly. It's not